When learners, they start having interactions, they have to build a relationship with their interlocutors, and that's something that is different than just coming and presenting in front of an audience where nobody's going to interrupt me. I mean, you might just ask some questions, but that's it. And they're going to be different social contexts. It's different than the classroom. Classroom is always the classroom. Nothing changes. We are prepared for this. But then how do we go to a doctor's office? How do we go return an item to the store? How do we go have a chit chat with someone? How do we talk to the host family? We know we are never been prepared for those things. So interactional competence take those things into consideration. We also have, it also is important to know that when we are interacting with one or more interlocutors, we need to say things that are relevant and meaningful. So I can be completely and grammatically and syntactically correct, but what I'm saying may not make sense at all. Or I might just not react appropriately. So if you're telling me my dad passed away last night, I'm saying, oh, you know, I have a very hard exam today. Everything is perfect. I made myself understood. Grammatically, everything was correct, but terrible things that I said, right? So for many reasons, it was wrong. And also because there are more speakers involved, there are minimum 2 of them, we need to figure out a way to co-construct that conversation. At no point we can predict what's going to happen in this conversation. So if I'm going to go have a chit chat with my friend, or I'm going to go return an item to the store, anything could happen. I can't sit before and write my whole script. I'm going to say that, she would say that, I'm going to react like this. But obviously after turn 4, I think we're done. I'm going to have to figure out how am I going to respond to this, because nothing is going to go the way that I predicted it. So we want our students to be active participants. What do we mean by that? That's one of the things that have been really hard for our students, most students during the first year especially, that they are asked maybe a question, they answer the question, and then they're sitting and waiting for the next question. Well, this is not an interview. What can you add something? Can you add another question? But nothing. It's a silent moment. So we want our students to be able to add to the conversation. We want it to expand, to ask a follow-up question. That's very, very important in an interaction. We cannot dismiss that. We want them to know how can we shift from one topic to another without being too abrupt. So if I'm talking, that person is talking with a lot of enthusiasm about their new program, and suddenly I switch the topic to something that has nothing to do with that because I don't know, I don't have enough maybe language skills to just talk about that specific topic, then again, it may just not work, and it might just break down the conversation. It might make the other person extremely confused. What happened just here? I was talking about school, and she's talking about her dad, and I don't, did I say something? So again, or they may just think that that person talked about her dad, but because they didn't ask for any clarification, they moved on into a different direction. We want them to be able to know when is it the right time to jump into the conversation. So either way, it's really bad. If they don't jump at the right moment, they wait just for too long, there is a silent moment. If they're constantly overlapping, they might just be rude at certain times, and we don't want them to know when is it the right time for me to go in and have my turn, or at some point, can I select another interlocutor in the crowd to be my next speaker? That's another option for those who are a little bit more maybe advanced. Why? Well, we just realized that there is a lot of lack of conversational skills when we go even beyond the second year of instruction. So even when I was teaching my kids during the second semester of the second year, I realized they really cannot even keep up a conversation for even 30 seconds. I mean, it's just not happening. There weren't any focus in my curriculum on the interactional opportunities. We were not focusing on that. We were not preparing them for those things. And then it was really a missing piece in the curriculum. And also coming back to the textbook problem, as we can all see, I mean, again, in all the textbooks that I have, I don't really have good samples of authentic data where there is a conversation and interaction. The ones that I have, which do exist, they are extremely, extremely artificial, as we know. So it all started kind of, in 2015 when I started with my class. This is the first semester of the second year. I started saying, okay, you know what, I want to start doing this, and I want to see how I'm going to do it. What is it that they're capable to do? So if I put them in a situation, what are they going to do? And we started having tutors at our center. So I'm teaching French. It's not like Spanish. Unfortunately, we don't have that many, L1 speakers. So I needed to rely on my tutors. They were mostly Rice students coming and helping us. And one of the assignments that I had for my students, it was that you need to go to the tutor And for the first one, you're just going to go record your conversation with the tutor. We're going to watch it. There are subtitles, and then I'm going to give you a little activity that you can do in your group.
Bonjour. Bonjour. Je m'appelle Cécile. Bonjour. Bonjour. Je m'appelle Cécile. Je m'appelle Nicolas. Et je m'appelle. Enchantée. Donc vous êtes dans la même classe en fait. Oui. D'accord. Vous êtes en première. C'est votre première année? Deuxième année? Ah oui, première année. Première année. Moi aussi c'est la première année, mais on a master.
We're gonna look at in your group. I'm gonna ask you to look at the first dialogue that I have given you. And I have put 3 very simple questions for you to look at some of those turns that you can see and kind of like, observe and see what's happening there, what's going on, what could have happened maybe differently, so we can kind of, look at those things. So I'm going to give you 3 or 4 minutes to go back to your group and talk about it, please. So we're going to go to question number 1. What happens right after lines 5 and 7 when learners are asked a question? So in both lines are asked a question. What do you see? What is the reaction? What kind of answer do we get?
We were commenting on not only the transcript but also the body language.
The body language.
They asked as if they understood, but they weren't producing any answer. So the other person was like,
okay, what?
First year?
Say something, yes. Please say something, because I cannot read your minds, and I always tell my students, yes.
Yeah, it also occurred to me that, luckily enough, this is a tutor, so this is a sympathetic native speaker, but if this were a non-sympathetic native speaker, it's hard to imagine the conversation going on.
Exactly. And again, we are thinking about our learners ideally one day going into the real world and accomplishing and reaching a certain goal. So it's not going to always be chit-chat, here or lucky. One day they're going to have to go there and get something done, and then may not get anything done.
Conversation, it's like an interview where the native is asking the question and they're responding, but not asking additional information or supplying it.
Yes. And it's very clear that we don't need to ask them, but this is the format that they're kind of used to. So in the past, they're like, we are used to do interviews. What's wrong with you? Can you just ask us the question and we're going to answer your questions? This is too complicated. So they were at the beginning, it is true that it was very hard for them. Why do you put us in this situation? It's very awkward. Just ask us questions, we're going to answer. They didn't like it. It was hard for them. And how could they have reacted differently? So what could have been a good answer to question 5 of the L1 speaker? So are you in the same class? What could have been the next turn? What could that be? Yes?
So I could answer for myself, but also for the other person. So I'm in the first year and he's in the second.
Yes, either that or other options.
Ask to repeat the question
if you didn't get it, or if the yes is a real solid yes, then do we stop there? Can you ask another maybe question? Can you something more, something else related to the topic? But
Professor so-and-so.
Exactly. But the interesting thing is that, and we will talk about video recording and the why, is not only they said yes. If you look at their body exchange, they were just like, I'm done. It's good. I did a great job. I did yes. I have accomplished my goals. I'm here now. Okay, go on. So it's not even. They don't even feel the lack of the reaction that they're having in that moment. And going to question number, and then the next one, obviously, we talked about repair, where it's clear that they weren't able to understand, but they did not ask any clarification. And then what do we observe in line 12? What's happening there? So she says first year, the other one says second year, and the native says, me too, it's my first year, but for the master's. What's happening there? Yes?
He's doing what a real speaker would do and trying to further the conversation.
Yes. That, but also there was a tiny pause here. So there was a pause between when he finished second year and when she said that. What happened there? What was she hoping for? That's normal, right? What's your name? What's your name? They come back to me, right? If I'm asking your name, but you never ask my name, it's a little bit strange. And again, if you imagine this conversation in a target country, you can imagine how awkward a conversation would look like.
Oh, ouais. Elle m'a dit qu'il y avait une vidéo vraiment cool dans la conférence. C'est quoi cette vidéo?
C'est ça. C'est super.
Ils ont fait quoi dans la vidéo? Qu'est-ce qu'ils ont fait? C'est quoi la vidéo? Parce que je ne l'ai pas vu moi. Mais j'ai juste entendu que c'était cool.
Oui.
Il y avait quoi sur la vidéo? Est-ce que tu peux me dire un peu qu'est-ce qu'il y avait sur la vidéo? Par exemple, je sais pas.
Qu'est-ce que tu fais
dans la vidéo?
Dans la leçon.
Ah.
Okay. That took a while, right? So we're gonna do the same thing. If you could just turn your paper and do kind of the same observation about the second sample with your group, that would be great. Thank you. So for the first question, let's look at what's happening in line 2. So the native speaker says, she told me that there was a really, really cool video of the last conference, and she says, mm-hmm. So what's the problem? What is the mm-hmm? What does it mean, this mm-hmm? I mean, here, what does it show us? Well, we don't know because here, yeah, we don't really know. I mean, we're guessing that she doesn't understand because it was more like a yeah, But then, again, I'm going to go back to the same thing we do the other one. What could she have, how else could she have expressed maybe that she's understanding or not understanding? Because at this point, we don't even know which one really it is. Because it could be really or or So we don't know which one really it is. And of course, we guess from the rest that she didn't understand. But then what's happening there? Why doesn't she ask for any clarifications? Why do you think? She might be processing. One of the things that, again, we go back is, I'm going to point out, beside the whole interactional practices that we have to work with the students and prepare them, is, again, how our textbook prepares the students. In most textbooks that we have in French, they teach them they don't teach them really how L1 speakers ask questions when there's a spoken interaction. They don't do that. They teach them in a more artificial way to do it because sometimes it's also more simple. But then they don't know how to deal with this kind of questioning because it's not in the textbook. And then because it's not a textbook, we had a tendency to not teach it. So our observations of sample 1 and 2 are that the students are lacking interactional practices such as repair, which is asking for clarification and repetition. And they are not being active participants, like in example 1. They cannot expand the topic and they cannot ask any follow-up questions, which is like a pretty basic thing that they learn how to do in the simple present tense. This is really first semester French, really. Hi, how are you? What's your name? Which classes are you taking? Very simple, but they still can't even do that. And that was the alarming part for me, that when I did that, I was, wow, what have I been doing? I've been trying so hard. This is their third semester. Many students came to me right in that semester, not that they were all my students, but some of them were, and they still couldn't do it. So when can we start teaching it? Because a lot of, a lot of instructors may say that it's really difficult, how can we do it? But in reality, we can really start planting the seeds as early as the first semester. It's really hard to say, I'm gonna wait till later on. It might be a later time during the first semester. It might be a more gradual work. They may need more simple conversations like this one that I have, but it can be done. It's not something that we need to wait for it. And then one day say, wow, they already know so much of the grammar and the vocabulary and everything, but they cannot still have 4 questions back and forth and 1 repair maybe. And we need to bring simplified activities based on the collected recordings. So the way that it is basically working is that by collecting that data becomes teaching material for the same or other classes. It's not only for them, it's also for other students. So we do rely a lot also in our classes on native speakers recording. So we did have that between learners and L1 speakers, but I do bring also native speakers recordings. Why is that? It's because by bringing, and I'm not saying that you need to bring the video to class, which is very maybe overwhelming, but you can bring the transcription of that video and help students see what are those interactional practices that are used by the speakers of that language. It's great to work on their own and on other students' recordings, but it's also great to be exposed to how native speakers speak the language and use it, because they are a live model and because it's not in our textbook. And again, textbooks only have simplified, modified version of those interactions. one point that I wanted to make, and I'm going to come back to it, is that we do not just send the students just suddenly go get, have your conversations. Throughout many lesson plans, we start preparing them. We look at conversations, we prepare them, and we send them out there. And only their last conversation is a graded conversation. We usually they have about 4 conversations. The first one and the last one is video recorded. The 2 others are not, for the same reasons that you mentioned. So there is no pressure, there is no stress. And then the last one. So we give them plenty opportunities of getting feedback from us and practicing. And obviously they can even do more than 4. They can always go back to the tutors and practice even more than that. There is a body language that comes with us when we are speaking the language, which gives us a lot of information. So many things that I can understand, it's because I'm watching the video and I can say, oh, he just turned his head like this. Oh, she's just staring at him, she doesn't understand. I cannot get that from an audio file. It's really hard for me to know what's happening. Because of that, it's a more accurate and valid assessment. So if I want to grade them later on, I can go and tell them, look, at minute 34 seconds, you thought that you did a repair, but that was really not a repair. You were just sitting there, for example. But I have a living proof. It's a reference point for me to go back, and I can use it as a teaching tool, bringing it back to the classroom, and as an assessment tool. So to go back and kind of review the process, we do start with the practice. So the students video record their first conversation with an L1 or advanced speaker. They start working and reflecting on it. So what happens is that once they are done, I ask them to go and select 2 minutes of their video recording, and they go and focus on very specific interactional practices that we provide them with. So go look and see what's happening in those 2 minutes as far as those 3 elements. Was the repair needed in there? Did you do it? Were you able to expand the topic, for example? Were you able to jump in the conversation? So we look at all those things, but we don't do it for them right away. We ask them to do it first because we want them to hold them accountable, and we want them to be responsible. So one of the things that is very important, it was very important for us to keep in mind, is that we don't want to just be teaching it. We want to make sure that what we are teaching is also being assessed later on. And we wanted the students to know that what we are teaching them is directly linked to our assessment and has value. And it's not something that we do and we are done with it and we move on. So because of that, there are different ways that can happen. We do have the instruction cycle where, we do give them lessons, we practice with them, we analyze in class with them L1 speakers dialogues or learners dialogue. And by analyzing and creating lesson plans based on all of those things, we can teach them. And then we move on to assessment once they are ready and we have prepared them well. It can be written exercises, it can be spoken. So the moment that they go and they record themselves, we are dealing with spoken language, which in many cases, maybe in some of your languages, you're going to say, well, it's not possible, I don't have another person to record with that conversation. And that's when the written exercises are very valuable as well, because you can also rely on those. So you can ask them, for example, fill out the dialogue, complete the dialogue, expanding that, or see what is necessary. So they can become the other interlocutor in the dialogue and respond. There can be multiple choices. There are so many different ways that you can use a transcript for teaching and assessment purposes. Because oftentimes when we hear spoken language, we think about spoken language. We cannot think about how we can translate that into written work. And that is feasible very easily into quizzes, into final exams, into homework, into many things that all of my colleagues have been working on it, and they have done it. And the last part is that I'm going to just briefly talk about how we have developed in the center, with the help of many of my colleagues, an assessment tool, which it was used to be a checklist that the students would complete and a rubric that I would do for them. But then at some point we got to the point that it's just too much work. It's not, they have to kind of be together, and we kind of merge them together. I didn't bring a sample of it today because it was too much for this. It would just need another presentation to go over the whole, checklist and rubric. But it's basically, if you can just think about all of those interactional practices, it's basically that they need to focus on those specific ones and about the minutes where it's happening or it's not happening. And we can give them feedback based on that, and then we can grade them having that. So in order to finish, because I have a few minutes, I wanted to just show you a brief video of one of the students in the first recording video, after he went through, he went to the study abroad program and then he came back. It's very short, it may not tell much, but it's just to kind of show that we have a kind of the same vision when we go to the study abroad program, and it's true that they're in an immersion program, but not all study abroad programs, they do the same work. Just because they're in an immersion situation, that doesn't mean that they're going to learn. I've seen this summer many students in many programs speaking English the moment that they stepped out of the classroom, whereas we do have a language pledge and our students are really committed to speak the language. Thank you.